Hello people and welcome back to Ireland, land of the Pharaohs. And this is the last chapter, the last part of the last chapter, because I've broken into two parts. So it's been an interesting read, I've got to say. There's a lot I can take away from it, information. There's a lot I'll be discarding as well because I don't see the logic behind it. I feel that the author used a lot of Matrix and Orwellian references to try and support or justify certain opinions he has. But overall, it's been a good read. It's kind of run parallel with a lot of my own theories, but it's given me a whole different look at this Battle of the Boyne as well. And if there's any truth to the fact that this Battle of the Boyne was fictitious and just a ritual, well, it gives you a whole different look at the whole Protestant Catholic dilemma going over in Ireland right now. So, let's continue where we left off. The etymology of William's name shows it derives from the German Wilhelm, meaning helmet. According to Rosicrucian researcher Peter Dawkins, there is an order called the Knights of the Helmet, the spear-shaking Shakespeare fraternity, analogous to shaking the spear of knowledge at the dragon of ignorance, holds the helmet as representing the peak of knowledge and when put on, illuminates the wearer. Staying with the subject of Gemini for a moment, Peter Dawkins, elucidating on a Shakespearean monument, writes, "Twins are a recurring theme in Shakespeare plays, Comedy of Errors and Twelfth Night for example, and the whole design is symbolically in the sculpture reminiscent of Gemini, the heavenly twins, one immortal and the other mortal, Horace and William. The topic of twins runs throughout the ritual battle and on the terrain where it took place, for reasons yet to be fully discovered. To meet with his destiny, William must cross the Boyne just as Horus, the sun god, crossed the Milky Way by the way of Rostov to the Duat. As William proceeds with his journey on land, his counterpart in the sky, Horus, keeps abreast of his progress. Waiting for both on the other side is a divine king. In relation to Horus in the sky, it is Osiris, and for William on the ground, it is James, who we know regarded himself as a divine king. Osiris in the underworld, where the dead reside, and in the same way James is in the churchyard at Donore, in a cemetery where the dead reside. James never became involved in the battle itself, whereas traditional history tells us that William is in the middle of the action, because this was not James's role in the ritual. The argument put forward that he was a coward or a bad general, we discovered, just does not fit with his service record as a victorious hero of numerous battles on land and sea. James proved brave to a fault, writes Predrag Lenehan, and goes on, Don Juan Jose, the Spanish commander, and Lord Digby, a royalist courtier, both castigated him for needlessly throwing himself into forward trenches during a siege. More relevant to our story, he led 2 troops of cavalry against English infantry without the thought of his own safety. Could this be the same man we are supposed to believe stayed in the rear while his troops were in the thick of battle? No, the only thing that makes sense is that James was adhering to his character. More evidence will be presented to show this was so. When William crossed the Boyne on his white horse to reach Emwan, he partook in an occult ceremony, leading to him assuming the mantle of Horus King. James's role was then finished when he left the field and Ireland without striking a blow in anger. William, we established, also left Ireland as soon as an appropriate opportunity presented itself. James seems to have gone out of his way to ensure that there was as few injuries as possible. He left orders that no Dublin Protestants should be harmed when he left. According to reports in the manuscript, A Light to the Blind, James had already packed and decided to retreat the night before the battle. The king, 'tis true, resolved in the evening of Monday to decamp that night, but unhappily again that resolution was not executed till Tuesday morning, the 1st of July, about 8 o'clock. Enda O'Boyle, quoting a Danish diarist, says, About midnight a deserter came in, who reported that the enemy had struck all his tents and sent off his baggage, so there was every sign that he might withdraw. She also reflects on a report from Nicholas Plunkett, who writes, The king resolved in the evening on Monday to decamp that night, but unhappily again that resolution was not executed till Tuesday morning, July the 1st at 8 o'clock. Both these authors, Boyle and Plunkett, appear to have been confused as to what was going on. Boyle puzzles over this when she muses, "It is difficult to understand what James had in mind at Dunor on the eve of the battle. We know now, of course, why he waited until Tuesday, the 1st day of July at 8 o'clock, since it was only then that the stage would be properly tiled for the ritual to take place. It also indicated that this was a solar ritual. If any movement had taken place on Monday, Moon Day, it would have indicated a lunar ritual. Interestingly, Tuesday in solar terms is named in honour of Mars, the god of war. Boyle explains this from a mundane perspective. At the Williamite Council of War that evening, the Duke of Schomberg urged that a crossing should be made that night upriver at the fords of Rosannerie. William vetoed Schomberg's proposal because he was of a superstitious nature and would never undertake anything of importance on a Monday, and that day, June the 30th, was a Monday. When our quest began, there was no suggestion that the evidence supporting this historic battle as being a ritual would have been so compelling. Examining the iconic paintings of William crossing the Boyne, we noticed that William, on his rearing white horse, is pointing his sword over the head of the horse, close to its forelock. In White's original painting, it was a baton. However, if you remain with a pointing sword, you will now see that his symbolic white horse, the Williamite General Solmes, said that William actually rode a black horse at the battle, could be interpreted as a mythical unicorn, an emblem of the Scots, and ultimately a symbol of the House of Israel. In Sir Lawrence Gardner's book, Bloodline of the Holy Grail, there is a chapter called House of the Unicorns, in which he details the history of the Royal House of Stuart. Gardner claims that this house arose from a martial union of the hereditary lines of Jesus and his brother James, and has long been known as the House of Unicorns. He continues, along with the Davidic Lion of Judah and the French Judaic Fleur-de-Lis, the Desponcinic Heirs of the Lord unicorn was incorporated into the Royal Arms of Scotland. The Royal Arms of Scotland was incorporated with the English arms into the British coat of arms when James IV of Scotland became James I King of England in 1603. The unicorn was considered, according to Gardner, to correspond to the virile Jesus and was related to the anointing messianic imagery of Psalm 92:10. But my horn shall thou exalt like the horn of a unicorn, and I shall be anointed with oil. Gardner gives us a further clue as to William's status by identifying the early Christian symbol cross of male and female unity, the well-known saltire, cross of St. Andrew with the unicorn in the Grail bloodline. It was by no chance that the fabulous beast of the Grail bloodline found his place as guardian of the lion in the arms of Scotland, along with the early Christian sign of male and female unity. In Jan Wick's symbolic painting of the battle scene, housed in Malahide Castle near Dublin, the symbol Gardner refers to can be seen on the rump of William's horse. In ancient myth, the unicorn is cognate with the goat. If you examine closely the British coat of arms, you will see that the unicorn has a beard and cloven hoofs. Waddell claims this goat is a rebus for Goth. The goat was the especially sacred animal of Indara, as recorded in the Sumerian and Vedic text, and Indara himself, as therein cited, called by the Sumerians the he-goat, and Thor and his Goths are also called the he-goats in Gothic Eddas, wherein Thor is called Sigfather, the identical name by which Bel also is called. In passing, it is worth mentioning that Waddell agrees entirely with Gardner regarding what the X characterises, although he equates St. Andrew with Indara. By inference, then, we have William riding the goat, unicorn, a colloquialism for an element of the arch-purple degree initiation within the Orange Order. We have previously seen that this is the same initiation degree where William received his wounds. There is a similar degree in the Masonic Order called the Entered Apprentice, upon which the orange one is probably based. A couple of verses in the Bible used by the British Israelis to underline theories about the unicorn being the symbol of the Israelis as having substance are as follows. God brought them out of Egypt, Israelis. He hath, as it were, the strength of our unicorn. When Moses has given the Israeli tribes his blessing before he departs from them, he says, "His glory is like the firstlings of his bullocks, and the horns are like the horns of a unicorn. With them he shall push the people together, and they are the 10,000 of Ephraim, and they are the thousands of Manasseh." Another coincidence appears because the 10,000 led by Menhard, Count Schomberg, separates from the thousands of William's troops. Schomberg's son, Count Meinhard Schomberg, with a force of cavalry and dragoons amounting to about 10,000, was to move to the right to attempt a crossing at the fords at Rosnaree. As William continued his participation in this increasingly astonishing ritual, we need to refer continually to our sky map, see opposite, to understand what is happening both in the sky and on the ground, because if we depend entirely on established wisdom, there is only confusion. We could declare, along with the psalmist, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament sheweth his handiwork. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard." Symbolism, like mathematics, as a universal language. Let us slot another related piece into the picture. James also symbolises Set Typhon, the god of chaos, and it has been observed that James's behaviour thus far supports this. There is ample evidence that strengthens this premise, and which this example will serve to refresh our memory. James held a council of war, and it was decided after the army had been assured that a stand would be made, not to fight, but to retreat. When morning arrived, the baggage was packed up and sent off to Dublin, and with it were sent 12 of James's total of 18 pieces of artillery. To add to our speculations that James may have had his mind more on retreating than on making a stand, there is an account which says that on Monday James, in a not very optimistic frame of mind, sent Sir Patrick Trant, First Commissioner of the Revenue, and another gentleman to Waterford to prepare ships. Thus it appears that even at this stage James may have had his mind set more on leaving the country than on making a stand. What is certain is that he withdrew 12 of the 18 cannon, the other 6 belonged to the French, and sent them on to Dublin. These were the cannon which carried out a constant bombardment of the Williamites on the previous day. Was James a coward who had no intention of fighting, or a player in an ancient ritual? Knowing his personal history, we would have to choose the second option. James was privy to the real story, even if his officers were not. Referring to the sky map again, we note what is happening at 4 AM. We will continue to recap this as we strip more layers to get the deeper levels of the ritual. On the morning of the ritual battle, William is preparing, as the sun rises, an event known as Horakti, an ancient Egyptian meaning Horus in the horizon. So this is one of the view of the eastern sky over Dunor at 4 AM on the 1st of July 1690 as Horus' sun enters the arena. So there's the sun at the bottom here of the horizon, Gemini on the left of it. And then the scene at approximately 8 AM, Mars, god of war, rises and the ritual battle commences. So there's Mars at the bottom there, coming above the horizon. The sun's high in the sky there, with Orion on the right. So we've got the Milky Way coming across the top, with Orion on the right, the sun higher up in the sky now. The scene at 12 noon, at the same time as William prepares to cross the River Boyne, Horus' sun is set across the Milky Way. The scene at 10:15 PM, Mars exits the stage, signalling the end of the ritual battle. So here's Mars coming down. Schomberg, with his complement of 10,000 men, sets off for Rosnaree as Orion, Osiris the Divine King, arises on the opposite bank of the winding waterway. Moving forward to 8 AM, the time most observers give for the beginning of the battle proper, the opening shots were fired at Rosnaree at 8 AM, and the pursuit of the retreating enemy lasted until approximately 10 PM. William, in the role of the Sun King, moves to his position on the banks of the Boyne, and, we noticed, at this exact moment, Sirius the Dog Star is on the horizon. Furthermore, on the banks, as it were, of the Milky Way is Horus, Venus, Horus's mother wife, accompanied by Mars, the god of war, and Mercury. In Greek mythology, Mercury represents Hermes, messenger of the gods. It was his duty to guide the souls of the dead down to the underworld. In the sky, Orion, Osiris, is positioned in the Duat underworld. As on the ground, James assumes his role of Osiris in the underworld of Emwan, Donore, church, graveyard. There is no record of James ever leaving his position on Donore Hill. It could be said that he was crouching there like a lion, emblem of the Stuarts. He crouched, he lay down as a lion, and as a great lion. Who shall stir him up? It is commonly accepted by historians that William enters the battle at noon. This is when he crosses the threshold to enter the Boyne River, see sky map opposite. A short time later we find that when William is in the middle of the River Boyne, the sun is in the midst of the winding waterway, the Milky Way. The whole ritual is epitomized in the ancient Hermetic axiom, as above, so below. Evidence has been offered that the unicorn is the ancient symbol of the Scots and the Israelis, and is represented by William, while on the opposite bank stands James of the House of Stuart, whose symbol is the lion, emblem of the Scots and the House of Judah. These two symbolic creatures are supports of the British coat of arms, now called the Arms of Dominion. These arms were completed when James I became King of England in 1603. This is a full 21 years before Monoceros, the constellation of the unicorn, was officially discovered by Jacob Bartsch. Although there is general acceptance amongst astronomers it was discovered as long ago as the 15th century. Bartsch, by the way, was son-in-law of Johannes Kepler, a famous Rosicrucian. Let us now review what is happening in the sky on this glorious morning. The time is 8 o'clock and we find on one bank of the Milky Way the constellation of Leo, the lion, and on the other, you will hardly be surprised to learn, is the constellation of Monoceros, the almost invisible unicorn. Just to crown it off completely, as it were, atop of the British coat of arms is a little lion, and what do we see in the sky atop of Leo Major? Leo Minor, the little lion. Compare also the visor, position between the lion and the unicorn, with the sign for Cancer, the crab that sits between the constellations of Leo and Monoceros. What has just been revealed is the symbols of the ancient British, Scots, Irish, Judah and Israel, represented in relation to each other on the British coat of arms, and similarly in the sky on the morning of the ritual battle. Moving forward again we see, as the ritual ends, about 10 p.m. according to traditional historians, Mars, the god of war, dipping below the horizon, or more appropriately, departing this remarkable figurative amphitheatre. This almost completes an ancient ritual battle, dedicated to the memory of an ancient race, and an ancient kingdom, and a clarion call for freedom. It is also a metaphor for the reuniting of a divided nation, the 12 tribes of the so-called Israelis reuniting after being separated for over 1,000 years. If you still find this story incredible, then read on. The supplementary evidence is plentiful. There is an obelisk built at the spot where William was wounded, for example. Would it not make more sense if this symbol commemorated his initiation and inauguration as Horus King? An obelisk indicates a Osiris ritual, and Osiris ritual, according to the Egyptologist and author Ahmed Osman, indicates the investiture of a Pharaoh king. To reinforce my argument that there is something unique about the ancient House of Orange, we can move forward from 1690 and the Battle of the Boyne to 1815 and the Battle of Waterloo. Here on this battlefield we discover another monument. This is a lion monument, a sphinx, atop of a pyramid, to commemorate the place where William, Prince of Orange, was wounded. Here follows an email reply to an inquiry about Waterloo, and the Prince of Orange, reproduced as received. The Prince of Orange, the future William II, fought under Wellington's command and was wounded at the end of the Battle of Waterloo at about 8 p.m. He was only 22 years old at the time, but he had a very good aide-de-camp. The Swiss de Constant Rebec in Wellington's army, it seems that he translated Wellington's orders from English to Dutch and German. 5 languages were spoken in Wellington's army. The Lion Monument was built in the supposed spot where he was wounded. Exactly the same list of events concerning our William happened at the Boyne. This was his father's wish and choice. William I, his father, visited the battlefield a few months after the battle. The Lion Monument was built between 1824 and 1826, while we were under the Netherlands' reign. We Belgians became independent in 1830. I hope I answered your questions, Isabel Baker. This should provide us with enough evidence that the House of Orange has, and always had, and still has, important occult links. An important question arises on how to explain the bodies and artefacts that are usually found at the end of every major battle. Mainstream historians tell us that there were over 2,000 fatalities and a great expenditure of ordnance as the two armies exchanged bombardments. William was using a new type of weapon, a prototype machine gun. However, how, therefore, in the face of all this, can it be argued that the main purpose of this battle was a ritual to invest William as Horus King? Let us examine these assumptions. We discover right away, although there were 2,000 casualties, there were no individual graves. True, there is a mound nearby with a plaque on it, the explanation given that it's possibly where the dead were buried. Another tenable reason for the lack of corpses comes from Una Sheehan of the Obelisk Centre at the Boyne River. She surmises that some of the dead were taken back to their own counties to be buried. But is this likely? Finally, there is a theory that most sank into the soft ground for whatever reasons. There are no individual graves on the battle site. This brings us to the artefacts, cannonballs, buttons, bullets and such like. There must be something left as evidence of the conflict, since there was a cannonade that lasted for more than a day. There was also the fierce fighting taking place in the river and on both banks. William was apparently heard to murmur while observing the ferocity of the French cavalry attacks against his blue guards. My poor guards, my poor guards. These thoughts challenged me for some time until Providence struck again. A friend introduced me to a local man named John Smith, who had an unusual hobby. John and some of his friends were members of a metal detecting club whose main interest was searching ancient battlefield sites for artefacts. My friend arranged a meeting with John because of the unusual information he had about the site of the Battle of the Boyne. It transpired that John's club had gone to the site of the battle to survey it in the hope of finding some antiquities, as it was his ambition to find something on the particular site. John made his notes from 1986, the date they explored the site, available to me. By any standard they were amazing and made exciting reading in the context of my research. At the outset, it would be well to make clear that John and his friends were very experienced at metal detecting, and the equipment they used was top of the range. They were, therefore, people who knew what they were doing, and to put this into proper context, John's team had already explored older battle sites with great success. They found, for example, plenty of stuff, in John's words, meaning relics including ammunition, uniform buttons and coins from a battle that took place near a small Irish town called Benburb from the year 1646, a full 44 years before the historical events at the Boyne occurred. These are some of the observations from his notebook after the group investigated the Boyne site. Useless, not even a musket ball. Something's not right here. James's camp at Dunor, useless. With typical Irish humour and a touch of irony, because, as explained, it was goal of John's to salvage something, preferably a cannonball, from the site, he wrote. If there was a battle here, they must have thrown stones at each other. Consequently, we are left with the mystery of a battle without graves and few artefacts. Another interesting point is that the river was dredged during the 1980s, and all they recovered was a musket that the museums in Drogheda and Dublin fought over for possession. A strange battle indeed. However, it is futile for academics to say that it was an event of no consequence, since it has touched the lives of uncountable people, and not only in Ireland, where the greatest tremors have been felt, but as we discover throughout the world. Resolution of this ambiguity will be deferred until another time. One of the methods employed to look at this ritual battle has been the use of Astro-theology. You might remember, as mentioned earlier, that this event has many levels of understanding. Astro-theology helped bring us closer to an understanding of how the ancients interpreted events in the sky, and how these reports were later manipulated into religious concepts. In the Osiris ritual, when Horus defeats his uncle, Set or Seth, this is seen as a metaphor for light defeating darkness, the great enemy of prehistoric man. This resonates with the initiatory order of rituals that have their purpose the act of light overcoming darkness, or knowledge defeating ignorance and superstition. William emerges, metaphorically, from the northeast to defeat his uncle in darkness. James, it has been proposed, represents, in one of his guises, Set, Typhon, the god of chaos, and we discovered that even a cursory look at the history of James's record before the battle, would see him as befitting of this character. Everything James did from the moment William landed on the English town of Torbay could easily be interpreted as chaos or confusion. Certainly his generals and anyone who tried to assist him thought so when he arrived in France after the battle. The unanimous verdict of the French court was, when you listen to him, you realise why he is here. To summarise: 1. William underwent certain initiations the day before the battle, and on the day itself took part in an ancient ritual. 2. The main purpose of the solar ritual battle was, among other reasons, to enthrone William as a Horus king, so that he could legally rule with his wife Mary. We can observe the earthly Horus, William on the white horse symbolising the Sun King, as he makes his journey on the ground. At the same time we can watch the heavenly Horus progress by observing the Sun, since their movements that day were identical. Just to make sure we understand this is a solar ritual, Wyke, in his painting of the battle, shows William on his horse, Monoceros, the one-horned unicorn, and on the ground beside him a small dog. This configuration reflects the twin star systems of Canis Major, which includes Sirius, the dog star, as its major star, the dog in the painting, and Canis Minor with its star Procyon, William, on the other side of Monoceros, being William's horse, mirroring exactly their positions in the sky. The history of these two stars, Sirius and Procyon, are replete with mythology. E.W. Bullinger says the Egyptian name for Procyon in the Denderral zodiac is Sebak, which means conquering or victorious. See illustration above. So we've got two pictures here. Above, how Monoceros or Monoceros and the Canis Minor were portrayed in the 18th century. Right, the representation of William as Horus, the Sun King, on his white horse. Note the similarity of posture between the images of the dogs in both illustrations. Note the similarity of posture between the images of the dogs. Fair enough, the posture's similar, but one major thing is the dog on the picture on the right is underneath the horse, whereas the picture on the left, the dog is above the horse. So it looks like he's just trying to... Again, it's a coincidence, but I don't think it's the posture, looking at the posture of the dog. The thing is, the posture is kind of dictated by the artist that draws over these star maps. The movements of the stars and the movements of the stars and the planets in the sky on the morning of the ritual battle reflected exactly what was happening on the ground and vice versa. 4. In Egyptian mythology, one of the guises of Set in his battle with Horus is that of a black pig. Coincidentally, just north of the battle site is a physical border that runs across Ireland, dividing it into two, known as the Black Pig's Dyke. It consists of great linear earthworks and a series of massive defences, some 12 miles wide in places. It was built about the 1st century BCE to separate Ulster from the rest of Ireland. Another more complex explanation for this dyke is that it was built to keep out the Black Picts, an aboriginal tribe of Ireland and Scotland, and should be really called by that name, i.e. the Black Picts Dyke. Coincidentally, there is a similar wall or dyke in Scotland called the Picts Dyke, originally erected by the Britons as a defence against the northern Picts and Huns. For more information and a detailed explanation, see Ellie Waddell's book, The Phoenician Origin of Britons, Scots and the Anglo-Saxon, pages 97 to 197. Number 5. The British coat of arms can be seen reflected in the sky on the morning of the battle, but we will discover that this coat of arms is representative of much more. Also present on the morning of the ritual battle, identified by their symbolic, astronomical and planetary bodies, are Isis, Venus, Hermes, Mercury, Mars, god of war, Osiris, Orion and Horus, the sun. 6. Osiris was known as the Corn King, and the area where the ritual battle took place was the Corn Country. 7. The ritual started at 8 a.m. and continued until about 10:15 p.m. The planets and stars reflected these times in their passage across the sky. Mars in particular, representing the god of war, whose rising and setting approximates the beginning and end of the battle. One of the major symbols of the Orange Order is an orange arch. This represents the ecliptic, the path of the sun through the houses, giving us another clue that this was a solar ritual battle. The symbolism contained within the ritual battle plainly illustrates the connections of the tribes of Israel and Judah to each other, as indeed does the Orange Parade and Mardi Gras celebrations in Belfast on the 12th of July, which commemorates this glorious ritual battle. Deeper symbolism reflects the diaspora of an ancient lost race. According to Plato, 10 princes left Atlantis. We also note that 10 lost tribes of Israelis wandered in the wilderness after leaving Egypt, and that there are 10 districts on the parade in Belfast on the 12th of July, new calendar, in the higher degrees of the orange, colloquially known as the black. The lodges are known as the encampments, reflecting the camps of the Israelis as they made their way home. 11. The underpinning of the constitution of the Protestant Orange Order is found in the Catholic, Stuart Jacobite philosophy of religious freedom, to worship according to your conscience. See Appendix 4. 12. As we come to the finale of our story, we will look at one final paradox. This concerns Plato's placing of the mythical Atlantis in the Atlantic Ocean, beyond the so-called Pillars of Hercules. These pillars have always been associated in the modern mind with the Straits of Gibraltar, even though no pillars actually exist there. However, if we redirect our gaze towards the northeast of Ireland, to the coast of Ulster, we find the Giant's Causeway, which consists of pillars of basalt, some of them 40 feet high, thrown up by an upheaval, supposedly 60 million years ago. So here's the British coat of arms in the sky, so he is implying. Above and right, the British coat of arms takes on the spatial distribution of the constellations of Leo, the lion, Monoceros, the unicorn, Leo Minor, the little lion, and Cancer, the crab. This is the sky configuration at 8 a.m. on the 1st of July 1690. So have a look here, we've got the sun in the middle, which he says is Horus. We have Monoceros on the right, we have the unicorn on the right and the coat of arms. We've got Leo on the left, with the lion on the left here. We've got Leo Minor away on the far left here, and there's a little lion right on the top, in the middle there, so that's wrong. If Leo Minor was right there, that would be pretty cool. But I suppose it's close enough. Cancer, what does he say that Cancer is? I suppose he's got a point. Coincidentally, on the island of Staffa in the Inner Hebrides, there are similar pillars which gave rise to the legend that the Irish giant Finn McCool built a road to reach Staffa where his beloved was living. Travellers to Ireland sailing from the east, especially Scandinavia, would oft times navigate the northern tip of Britain to reach the east coast of Ireland and Boyne. If coming from the west, they would sail around the northern tip of Ireland. From whichever direction they approached, they would have to sail in the Atlantic. This entrance is nowadays called the North Channel, and pass through these pillars. According to L.A. Waddell, the Phoenician origins of the Britons, Scots and Anglo-Saxons, Hercules was a hero of the British. If this is the case, are these basalt pillars the true pillars of Hercules? 13. Horus was the uniter of the two lands. William, it could be said, united the two lands, Ulster and Ireland, as well as the divided houses of Israel, Judah and Zara, Pharaohs. Finally, we can see the destination of our incredible journey. The picture puzzle is almost complete. We watch in anticipation as this escalating image reveals two kings of the powerful houses of Stuart and Orange. participating in an ancient Osirian ritual in Ireland. As we ponder this enigma, a memory surfaces of a virtually derelict path. We can recall, as we explored this path, being propelled through a portal to discover the du jour history of Western civilization and how the elite, the majority of people know very little about, manipulates history. This held out the possibility of changing our view of society forever. We now invite two more modern sages, Graham Hancock and Robert Bouval, to present the astonishing finale of our saga. What we have in this amazing story is a sort of treasure trail of clues as to how the ancient Egyptians themselves saw the mythical historical transfer of the deeds or keys of the kingdom of Osiris to Horus. Transposed onto our story, this reads as the deeds or keys of the kingdom of Osiris being transferred to William of Orange, the new Horus king. Possibly this was the great seal allegedly lost in the River Thames, but found and returned by fishermen when James was fleeing England. According to ancient Egyptian mythos, the kingdom of Osiris is found in the sky, bounded by Leo, Monoceros, Leo Minor and Cancer the crab, a distinct pattern of stars at a specific celestial location that comes complete with its own cosmic Nile, reflected in our story as the Boyne. The final piece of the puzzle slots into place and completes the ancient cipher, encoded by the mystery schools, to reveal for the first time ever the surprising location of the earthly kingdom of Osiris. Atlantis, the birthplace of Western civilization, it is Ireland, land of the Pharaohs. Epilogue. Some of my earliest memories are of looking on in awe and excitement as thousands of orangemen with drum, fife and Scottish pipe bands, the banners flying in the breeze, marched past. My turn to walk the same route was yet to come. It was the 12th of July on the sandy row in Belfast, Ireland. Even our capital city is symbolically named in honour of the ancient god of the Israelis. This then was my earliest remembrance of seeing this colourful Mardi Gras and looking with rapt wonder as the many iconic paintings of the banners of Prince William on his rampant white charger crossing the Boyne. It was about this time that the question began to drive me like a splinter in my mind as to why he was never portrayed fighting James. It was to be nearly 50 years later before the answer was to reveal itself that the idea of William fighting at the Boyne was not the reason he was there. Crossing the mysterious river was the hidden purpose. In an early portrait he is seen holding a baton or pointer, symbolically gesturing towards the hidden portal that revealed the true ancient history of the Scots-Irish people. It had always been an inner knowing that what had happened in Bruna Boyne at the Boyne River was of far greater import than most of us had ever suspected, although some have hinted at it. The importance in history of the Battle of the Boyne is beyond all comparison with its interest as clash of two armies. The strange event befell that what was the final defeat of the Catholic and national cause of Ireland was greeted with a Te Deum in Catholic Vienna, though with mixed feelings by the Pope. At first glance it seemed to me that the reason that William and James took part in this ritual was quite simple. That was to promote William to Imperator, master of one of the branches of the mystery schools, and to invest him as Horus king to legitimize his reign. However, as my research continued, I discovered deeper levels of this ritual that was only left clues to the history of Western civilization, but also showed there was a powerful patronage behind Prince William. This appears to have been the mysterious Khazarian bankers in the form of the Dutch East Indian Company and the Knights Templar. There was this supposition that this was partly in continuation of a dispute from at least the time of Charles II by shadowy figures competing with each other to gain control of Great Britain, the kingdom of Osiris or Atlantis, and the fledgling British Empire that spanned the world. It could also be argued that William was a civilizing influence, as Osiris was in ancient Egypt. There is a lot more to be discovered about the amazing ritual and the landscape it took place in, which could answer some of the perplexing questions that beset our society today. It was proposed that there is an invisible establishment elite, a secret government, of which many famous personages down the centuries have warned us, its members being in a position to influence our perception of history and reality. Copious evidence has been presented to prove this proposition. Does this mean that there is an international conspiracy? This is a confusing concept, the wrong question we struggle to understand. A good example of this confusion can be found in a little book called The Jew and American Ideals by John Spargo, referred to by Nesta Webster on page 37 of her books. He observes, belief in widespread conspiracies directed against individuals or the state is probably the commonest form assumed by the human mind when it loses its balance and its sense of proportion. Yet, the same author says elsewhere in his book, I found in England great nationwide organisations, obviously well financed, devoted to the sinister purpose of creating anti-Jewish feelings and sentiment. I found special articles in influential newspapers devoted to some evil purpose. I found at least one journal, obviously well financed again, exclusively devoted to the fostering of suspicion, fear and hatred against the Jew, and in bookstores I discovered a whole library of books devoted to the same end. My personal view is, after doing the research for this book, that there is no conspiracy in the sense that a group of people are sitting somewhere plotting to take over the world. However, there is a global system which has been in place for thousands of years, made up of a select families, houses, who know the system and make good use of it to their and the family's advantage. The contemporary manifestation of this so-called conspiracy is only understood by persistent investigation. You will find it is indeed maintained by the international debt-based banking system. All the perplexities, confusion and distress in America arise not from defects in the Constitution or Confederation, nor from want of honour or virtue, so much as downright ignorance of the nature of the coin, credit and circulation. John Adams. The invisible money power is working to control and enslave mankind. It finance communism, fascism, Marxism, Zionism and socialism. All of these are directed to making the United States a member of world government. American Mercury magazine. The Trilateralists Commission is international and is indeed to be the vehicle of multinational consolidation of the commercial and banking interests by seizing control of the political government of the United States. The Trilateralist Commission represents a skillful, coordinated effort to seize control and consolidate the four centres of power: political, monetary, intellectual and ecclesiastical. Finally, Barry Goldwater. Finally, this from Robert Hemphill, Credit Manager of Federal Reserve Bank, Atlanta, Georgia. This is a staggering thought. We are completely dependent on the commercial banks. Someone has to borrow every dollar we have in circulation, cash or credit. If the banks create ample synthetic money, we are prosperous. If not, we starve. We are absolutely without a permanent money system. When one gets a complete grasp of the picture, the tragic absurdity of our hopeless position is almost incredible, but there it is. It is the most important subject intelligent persons can investigate and reflect upon. It is so important that our present civilization may collapse unless it becomes widely understood and the defects remedied very soon. This system, benign or malignant, is a judgment call you must make for yourself. Unfortunately, no one can be told what the matrix is. You must see it for yourself. It is self-perpetuating, and all of us, to different degrees, help to construct it. Reference to film The Cube. There are relatively few people we have named in general terms the parasitical elite, but they have cloaked themselves in many other guises throughout the ages. The few who understand the system will either be so interested in its profits or so dependent on its favours that there will be no opposition from that class. The great body of people, mentally incapable of comprehending the tremendous advantages, will bear its burden without complaint. The controllers live in a symbiotic relationship with the system and believe it is their job to preserve it, because they want us to believe our civilization would fall apart if they defaulted on their responsibility as gatekeepers. Paradoxically, it probably would. If the parasite is destroyed, the host is damaged. Alexander Solzhenitsyn tried to explain this paradox. To do evil, a human being must first of all believe that what he is doing is good, and added, if only there were evil people somewhere insidiously committing evil deeds, and it were necessarily only to separate them from the rest of us and destroy them. But the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being, and who is willing to destroy a piece of his own heart? Until we, as a race, are ready to assume complete responsibility for our own societies, the controllers are always there to help, and in doing so acquire untold riches for themselves and their families. To put our ignorance, naivety may be more descriptive, of the complexity of the controlling system into context, a personal anecdote may be helpful. Most Sundays during those summers when we were children, my father would take my brother and me to the local park. In one part, around the park benches, there were usually gathered a group of what seemed like old men from the perspective of a 6-year-old, to watch and play chess. We would invariably stop to have a look, and each time the players would fascinate me with their seeming knowledge and unrelenting concentration. As we were watching, we knew that there was a game going on, but were ignorant of the rules, what the goal of the game was, or what was going on in the minds of the players. The majority of people passed by without a sideways glance, not realizing there was a game going on at all. They were there to relax, enjoy the sun, and prepare for another week of toil, and so remained oblivious to the game. Although there were a few of the spectators who knew the rules of the game, apart from the players of course, the majority did not know. This analogy helps to explain, in simplistic terms, how the game, the system, the program, in computer parlance, runs in the background with most people being unaware of it. Those that are aware of it either do not understand or misinterpret the rules. The small crowd watching knew there was a game in progress but did not know the game plan or what the outcome would be. If we were to substitute these amateur players with chess masters, we would be becoming close to understanding how brilliantly complex the system is that we have been discussing throughout this volume, especially in chapter 2. This story has, figuratively, written itself, but there has been times when there were strange incidents, as the pieces fell into place, that are still difficult for my sceptical mind to integrate. Is the story true, or is it, as Joe Downey wrote and quoted earlier about the bow Tain, a blessing on everyone who will memorise the Tain faithfully in this form and not put any other form on it? He then throws a few lines in Latin to the effect that the book is a pack of devilish lies and suitably only for the enjoyment of idiots. You may think, quite rightly, that most of my story is speculation and the evidence was sought to fit. Nevertheless, speculation is a useful tool, as the physicist, chemist and Rosicrucian Dr. John Dalton of the 19th century discovered when speculating on the nature of the atom. He formulated what was to become known as the Dalton's law of proportions, still in use today. As far as finding evidence to fit the story, I am in good company, because this was the method used by Newton to formulate the laws of gravity. Chris Groberg, a Russian historian I was corresponding with, asked, "Is your book historical fiction or speculative history?" I think the following from Dan Brown, author of the best-selling book The Da Vinci Code, will be a good answer to Chris's question. However, you must make up your own mind. Dan said, "Tales like these are a place where mythology, history and fact collide." Karl Popper wrote in his volume The Open Society and Its Enemies, "Although history has no meaning, we can give it meaning." This is what I set out to explore, if Irish history had any meaning for me. However, events overtook me and my investigations became global. In the final analysis, it is mystery, a personal story that started with a question and a suspicion that there was something wrong with what I had been told about history, like a splinter in my mind. This prickly sense of something being wrong was to act as my guide, which pointed me to a neglected path that led to a hidden portal that I hesitantly passed through, and in passing through engaged myself in an adventure that opened a veritable Pandora's box of conspiracies and intrigues. Surrendering to this drama opened my mind to extraordinary insights that demonstrated how we, as a race, have been manipulated in such an extent that it is difficult to comprehend. It is only little secrets need to be protected. Public incredulity keeps the big ones safe. And this new vista expanded. It revealed to me how enlightened were the Phoenicians, Aryans, and Britons, Scots-Irish, quintessentially the same race. We saw how they left Ireland, then a much larger island, that Beaumont, Waddell, Talbot, whose outstanding video Remembering the End of the World should be viewed by everyone who was interested in this era of investigation, and Donnelly, amongst others, thought of as a mythical Atlantis. At the outset, the story came out of my imagination and my life experiences. It was an invented story about the migration of the survivors of a mysterious race that left the area we now call Boyne. The remnant who survived did so because their wise men astronomers had spotted a comets heading for Earth, which gave them time to build shelters to protect themselves from the worst of the catastrophe. This left the few survivors to head as far inland as they could after the cataclysm, which was to the Great Northern Plains. It was from here, it was proposed, they migrated in waves over many years, south because it was the northeastern region of the planet that suffered most. Perhaps the reason why the Masons hold the North as a place of darkness, since that was a condition of the Northern Hemisphere after the impacts. The relic of this civilized race found themselves in a life or death struggle, after a life of relative comfort, but now all they had to help them survive were their minds. Even their gods had deserted them. Even the gods were terror-stricken at the deluge. They fled and ascended to the heavens of Anu. Are these ancient races our direct ancestors? This is a moot point, but in my view, a qualified yes. Even so, it would be comparable to think of a Rolls-Royce as a direct descendant of a Model T Ford. We are all of the same genome pool, but hardly recognisable as the same race. Their pilgrimage into the unknown, possibly in almost total darkness, lasted many years as the Earth experienced a nuclear winter. As the remnant of our lost race travelled south, finally arriving in the warmer southern hemisphere, but to them their God had sent his Son Saviour to bring light and life into the world again. The sun reheated the earth, providing them with the wherewithal they needed for survival. Their wise men had preserved the sacred knowledge and history of their ancient homeland, but they did not keep it all in one place, nor did it all reside with one group or race. Nevertheless, the most important teachings stayed within a core group that travelled into the mountain ranges of India and Tibet. The rest remained at the centre of the earth, Sion, where it was warm. Remember in chapter 4 it was noted that Giza is at the exact centre of the landmass of the earth. Here they had time to regroup, rebuild, and put their wisdom into practice, which left to posterity the magnificent monuments that still stand as a tribute to their knowledge and the ability of the human spirit to overcome almost impossible odds. William Faulkner identified this indomitable spirit of the human race in 1950 Nobel laureate address when he said, "Man will not survive, but he will prevail." Still, the instinct to return to their prehistoric homeland was irresistible, and the opportunity arose when they refused to allow the dark forces within the Egyptian priesthood to use their teachings for their own malevolent ends. This was to lead to their expulsion from their adopted homeland to wander in the wilderness as the biblical Israeli tribes, sometimes called the children of the light or enlightened ones, Illuminati. We are informed they wandered for 40 years, but 40 in the Bible is a metaphor for a full or complete time or cycle. One day, while ruminating on the sojourn of the Israelis in Egypt and their adventures after they left, a picture formed in my mind that showed them in their encampment, a Masonic orange-black preceptory Templar term, that can only be explained as a hallucination. During this experience there appeared, projected from my mind into space, a holographic picture. The vision placed me at the advantageous position overlooking their camp. Captains of the 10 tribes, it seemed to me, intuitively, following the end of a conclave of the elders, were galloping throughout the encampment, shouting at their people to quickly get to your tribe. We are going home. My mind, already extended to the limits of incredulity, quickly rewound to the first time I accompanied my father as we walked to the field, as the outward southern exodus is known to Orangemen and women. It fascinated me to watch the marshals, when we were ready to return home, as they went around the field shouting to everyone, "Get into your lodges, we are going home." When then we began our return journey back north and home. When this memory surfaced, a chill ran up my spine. The one that accompanies a knowing that this had to be more than imagination. The history of the Orange Order has been only one of the pillars of the story, but because of the central positioning of the Battle of the Boyne in our cryptogram, an important one. As my story progressed, it amazed me how many researchers over the years have stumbled across the same clues about this prehistoric race that had surfaced for me. Initially, it was confusing as to why no one has heretofore put together this incredible story, but after some preliminary research, the answer became obvious. None had the background to recognise some of the pieces to position them into the puzzle. Observing from an early age the confusion that existed amongst my race, whose ancestry is central for a proper understanding of Western civilization, as to who they were and what country their roots were planted in, inspired me to research and attempt to remedy some obvious misunderstandings about history. Because of the mystification of history, we cannot know what the future holds for any of us, but the further we look back, the further we will see ahead. When this was applied, the future began to look more positive, because knowing our true history, which, as we discovered, is amazing, then the future begins to look brighter. From a personal perspective, the recordings of this story has been a remarkable learning curve, as well as an inner voyage. Throughout this adventure, our path has crossed several great writers and researchers, some accepted by mainstream academia and some sadly rejected. Bailey, Beaumont, Waddell, Velikovsky, Wallace, Downey, Dawkins, Donnelly, Garner et al., who, to my amazement, confirmed most of my theories. It would be neglectful if Steve Bergstrom's name was left from my roll of honour. Steve has to be the most knowledgeable person outside the Brotherhood of the international banking system and its inner workings. He dissects the system to make it more understandable to the layperson, and then shows possible alternatives to what he calls wealth extraction of values, monetary and spiritual, from the many to the few. We did, however, agree to differ when it came to religion. If you would like to understand how the elite's money systems controls absolutely everything in our society, do yourself a favour and explore the references and the footnotes and then decide for yourself. It is acknowledged that various aspects in this story may be difficult for some, but it may help to remember that Timothy Freck and Peter Gandy wrote in their book The Jesus Mysteries. The creation of an appropriate history has always been part of the arsenal of political manipulation. They go on to say, and this resonated with me in a very personal way, to dare to question a received history is not easy. It is difficult to believe that something which you have been told is true from childhood could actually be a product of falsification and fantasy. Michael Sarian expresses a similar thought. We may fairly agree that the subject of history is commonly taught is one of the most boring of all subjects. However, the study of how the subject of history has been manipulated is surely one of the most interesting of all subjects. At some point during my story, a more profound truth crept up on me. It was a realization that each of us has a hidden portal buried deep within our own psyches. When found, and the threshold of this inner portal crossed, a personal and spiritual adventure is automatically triggered. The hope of this work is that you reassemble the scattered pieces of your own picture puzzle that will lead you to the portal of your hidden history, which reveals your inner self. This self is waiting to explain to you who and what you really are. Ultimately, we are the creators, for good or ill, of our own story, the interpreters of our own history, and architects of our own future. This is the true quest for the Holy Grail, as King Solomon discovered, and when the Grail self is found, everything else is added. If you embark on this quest, one thing is guaranteed, that you will have a life-changing experience. If it is only half as exciting and as lightening as mine has been, then it will be far outweigh any effort or discomfort you may experience as you discard some dearly held beliefs to embrace a different paradigm as you build a new and exhilarating future. Our civilization is in the midst of great transition. How we come out of this is dependent on the actions of each one of us. When enough of us embrace our responsibilities to ourselves and society, our future will be assured. It is my belief that when we come to a proper understanding and subsequent letting go of our history, we will burst through into a time of great enlightenment, a golden age. To echo Emerson 1803 to 1882, A glory is coming to man, such the most inspired tongues of prophets and of poets have never been able to describe. Therefore, I won't try. Finally, as we approach the conclusion of our amazing journey, you may have noticed throughout the body of my story the first person's pronoun I has not been used. This was deliberate ploy, since my part in this incredible narrative has been to gather and assemble the wisdom of other writers and researchers who are far wiser than me. John Bartlett says in his 10th edition of Familiar Quotes, I have gathered a posy of other men's flowers, and nothing but the threads that binds them is mine own. One last thought for me. I referred to some websites that may not be visible anymore, but for those who want to follow them up, here is a very useful web tool. It is www.archive.com. Here you will be able to find most sites that may have been taken off the web. Thank you for your company on my personal adventure, and if you reached this far, then there is something personal in the story for you, and since there is yet more that could be said or discovered about our incredible history, who knows? Maybe you will be the one to discover it. The final words are in remembrance and honour, although I only knew him a short time, of one of my mentors and friend, the late Joe Downey. Health and long life to you, the woman of your choice to you, land with rent to you, Agus, Bas, and Erin. The footnotes. So this is the footnotes, people. I'll slowly go through them, scrolling up so you can have a look yourself. And that is the end of the book, people. And it was very interesting, I've got to say. Gives me a different look on the Battle of the Boyne, at least. I've never really looked at it in this way. So Appendix 1. Should I read the appendix? Now I'll leave it at that. Those are just appendices, guys. The link for the books is in the description, so if you want to look at the appendix, have a look at that. But for me, that's the end of the book. I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you in the next video. Have a great weekend, people. Enjoy your Sunday. See you later.